Joining me now, first class father, Jason Frazer. Welcome to First Class Fatherhood.
Good to see you. And, look, it's always good to be in good company with fellow fathers because, we're a special breed. We're a special group of people. Not, everybody gets a chance to be a father. So, this is exciting for me.
I agree with you. So let's do this. How many kids do you have? How old?
So I have one. She is approaching 5 months old as of next week. She was born in November. Her name is Mahalia. And it's been, I'll say, an exciting but humbling experience as a father.
Yeah, I love when I get a chance to talk to new dads. Now, you guys one and done here, or are you guys going to try to add some more? What are we doing?
That's the multi-million-dollar question. For right now, I just want to get through the first year. Okay. Once I get through the first year, that may be something that we'll talk about here. But right now I'm trying to figure out how to cook dinner and warm a bottle and also keep her from crying all at the same time here.
All right, I like your style, Jace. All right, if you could just take a second to hit my listeners with a little bit about your background and what you do.
Sure. So originally from New York, studied political science in undergrad at Columbia University. Took me like 20 years to pay off those loans. Did about 3.5 years in the banking world. So I got a little education about how the markets work, how to sell, and how the banking system works. So that was pretty awesome. But, I'm a big believer in you have to focus on what your gifts are and what works for you. And, I just knew working in finance that I wanted to do something different. So I tried TV reporting. I knew a person that knew a person and did it for a little bit and did it for 9 years. Worked in Rochester, New York, Columbus, Ohio, Hartford, Connecticut, and then Boston. Boston is where I had I call it my quarter life crisis because at that point I was like, I really want to do something different. And I've always been fascinated by weather. And I'm a big believer in if you believe in yourself, the universe will respond to you and create those opportunities. And I knew that if I was not going to go into weather at that point, it just wasn't going to happen. So I went back to school, ended up getting another job in Savannah, Georgia, which led to another job in Cleveland, Ohio. And that's how I ended up here in Fox Weather as a midday meteorologist now.
Meteorologist. We don't go with weatherman anymore, do we? We don't go with that term. Is it meteorologist or weatherman?
I prefer the term meteorologist because I think sometimes when people think of weatherman, they just think of, oh, it's just you just talking about what happened and then that's it. Whereas I think as a meteorologist, we like to break down the science of why. I think back in the day, we didn't have phone apps. And so, we had to be characters more, to keep it engaging. And I think now, with technology, you almost have to create a reason for people to stay engaged and stay watching, I should say.
All right, well, take me back down about 6 months then, Jason. So how did becoming a father so far change your perspective here on life?
So it seems cliche, but everybody says that whenever you have a child, it's going to change your life forever. And it absolutely has. I think that there were some things that I used to be super focused on. And now I'm like, that doesn't even matter. I think as a married guy, sometimes, you'll be focused on like, hey, did I wash the dishes? Or, why didn't my, wife, finish doing the laundry? When you have a kid, you're just hoping that the kid is just alive at the end of the day. Right. So, I think the first way I think it's changed me is it's made me a much more patient man. Right. So I think what I've realized is everything is going to take time. And while I realized it before, I think, when you're just an adult and you don't have to take care of someone else, I think you can be very focused on the little details. Whereas, I think as a dad, you're more concerned about, did we get it done? Is this something that is fruitful and is something that's going to be beneficial long term? So I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing is, your children watch everything that you do, even at a small age. And so it has made me, I think, much more aware of, how I interact both with my wife and my family. It's also made me a lot more aware of just some of my behaviors in terms of how I look at myself and how I treat other people. And the third way, that I think I've changed really has been thinking more long term about being more inclusive, right? And what I mean by that is, before it was just my wife and I. So if we wanted to do something, well, we could just go out and do it. Whereas now it's really about how is this going to impact the baby short term, long term. And like right now, for example, we're trying to figure out should we go the nanny route versus the daycare route, right? And I'm almost like pulling my hair out, because there's the cost of a nanny, but then at the same time, I'm also thinking about all of the benefits, right? You can control your schedule. This one person is responsible just for your baby. But then I'm looking at the cost and I'm like, man, daycare seems so much more affordable. But then, now you got to think about, well, is the baby going to get sick, more periodically? Or, what does this mean in terms of work schedule? If something happens at the daycare, can I get right at home? So, there is a much more, I think, worldly perspective that I have now as being a dad that maybe I didn't necessarily have 6 months ago.
And Jason, too, it also forces a much different relationship that you have with your spouse once this happens. Like I'm married now almost 19 years. We have 4 kids, and so I'm a completely different person now than the guy that met my wife, 20 years ago. So it definitely changes the whole dynamic of the relationship. And these things, like you say, that you never had to focus on before: a daycare or nanny, a private school or public school. So all these different kind of conversations that you never even thought you'd have to have, all of a sudden become important. So far, what has it been like for you to watch your wife? I know she's in the news business as well. What has it been like to watch her so far become a mom and take on that role of motherhood?
It's been something that she's been looking forward to for years. I mean, early on, even when we were dating, one of her first questions for me on our first date, I'll never forget it, was, do you want to be a father? Because having a family and building a family was so important for her. And I've also noticed she's become a lot more patient, a lot more worldly in terms of her outlook and taking care of our family and making sure that everyone feels supported. I definitely feel like my wife listens more to us, and what our needs are. I won't say that she has become. I won't say that, and I have to be careful how I say this, but and this has happened for me too. I think a lot of times before you're a parent, you're either very career centric or you're very us centric. And now, being a parent forces you to be much more family centric. So now, there's the big question of, yes, I may want this next career move to happen, or I may want this next level to happen. But now I have to think about, well, am I going to have enough time for my kid? Because I don't want to pawn my kid off, with someone else. And so I think both of us are having more of those conversations about, one, how can we still have successful careers, but at the same time still be home and be good parents?
Yeah, very well said. I know many people, have some trouble in the beginning with that very same question, and as long as you guys are on board with the plan, that's what matters. So my wife stayed home for the first 13 years. This was the decision we both came to together after much discussion, and so that worked out for us. Now she's back. She works at the church that my kids go to school with. But so those are things that do come up that have to be on ball with that. Otherwise, it's a disaster. And what would you say? Another thing you got to kind of, get on board together is the type of values that you want to instill in your kids. So what would you say are the top values that you're hoping to instill in your daughter growing up?
Well, I think the first thing first is always treating people how you want to be treated. And I know that again, that sounds cliche, but I think in our society where we constantly tweet, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, etc., I think you can many times forget about why are we here? We're human beings. We like to interact with people. And so how you interact with people is how they are going to treat you. And, that's going to also impact, how you are going to not only feel about yourself, but also, long term, the opportunities that are going to be bestowed upon you. I think the second, part of this is also instilling values in her of believing in herself. I come from a family where we were working class. Being on television, my family, we didn't do that. What are you talking about? My dad at one time, he was a trucker. My mom at one time, she was a recruiter. She worked in HR. She did a little bit of real estate. And so, but both of my parents really instilled in me this idea that you can make the impossible possible. All it takes is just believing in yourself and making sure that you create a plan and you execute that plan. So I want my daughter Mahalia to know that it doesn't matter, what situation that you are facing. The biggest battle that you're ever going to fight is in your head. And as long as you have convinced yourself that you can do it and that you can achieve it, everything else, is going to line up. And I think the last thing is about the importance of, having God in your life. I'm a spiritual guy. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm religious. I would say I'm very spiritual. I believe in karma. I believe that when you do good, good will naturally follow you, and opportunities will naturally, happen for you. And but you have to also believe that we're not in control. There's something else. There is a higher purpose for your life. There is a reason why you are here at this moment, in history. And so as long as you are okay, with that understanding and that belief, and you have a spirit to serve at some point, Dad's going to be a very happy man.
Yeah, very well said, Jason. I think it's the key to what's going on in our entire country right now. Just the fact that we have such a godless and a fatherless society right now, combined with a lawless one, and it's just wreaking disaster in our country. But the fact that kids don't have that father figure in their life to instill these kind of values in them, we're seeing the results of those play out all over our country. And one of those aspects is a discipline portion that comes from the father. And I know that, I definitely discipline different than my wife does. We kind of play off one another. It's a discipline style that we've developed over the years. But it's different than the discipline style that my father and my mother used on me. So I know you guys only 6 months. There's no discipline necessary yet. But have you had conversations about spanking, timeouts? Have you talked about how you plan on disciplining your daughter, and what was the discipline style you grew up with?
Yeah, I think to your point, it's different for everyone and every parent. And I think the challenge I've always had is every parent always thinks that they do it well and it works for them, but I've always said, what works in your marriage may not necessarily work in mine, and vice versa. And so you have to figure out what works for you. We have talked about discipline and how we want to approach it. Our belief is that, before spankings, you got to level with people. You have to say, hey, what were you thinking when you did that? And make sure that they understand that, why it was wrong or why you need to, do it differently. Look, I grew up in old school, in a household where, yeah, if you did something wrong and you kept talking back, yeah, no, there would be a belt that would come out. And understand that even after you got the belt, there were still going to be repercussions later on, in terms of TV timeouts and no desserts and, some of the other stuff. We haven't gotten to that level, in really talking about a plan. I know that it's, coming around, but I've always taken the perspective of if you talk to people, including kids, and you have a better understanding of when you talk to them, why they're doing what they're doing, a lot of times that can be way more effective than spanking.
Yes, and some of this stuff, it's so much learn on the job training. Like until you're confronted with the situation, and you have a plan, everything kind of goes haywire, and you're like, man, I was going to do this, but now I ain't doing that. So it's a lot of it is on the job practice here. I think for so much of it, and I wanted to ask you, JC, because I read here that you were an aspiring pilot. Is that now? Is that still the case after becoming a father? Is that something you still look to pursue, or has becoming a father kind of changed that aspiration a little bit?
Look, I approach life that you always need to have different categories, right? Different interests. I DJ and I officiate weddings, and I only do it part time just because this is my main job, being a meteorologist. But in addition, I still have a fascination with flying. I love traveling. I plan to take Mahalia to several, different countries when she is of age, because I want her to experience it. I want her to have a worldwide view, not only of herself, but also understanding that, yes, you may be raised here in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, wherever we ultimately decide, but you are one piece of this very large, complex puzzle here. So maybe, one day I'll finally get my pilot's license and, I'll just say, hey, come on in, get in the plane and, we can just fly anywhere. But right now I'm really focused on raising her. But you never know. One day, you might hear me somewhere saying, "Hey, flight attendants, please be seated. We're approaching some turbulence." Who knows? But right now, I'm having way too much fun being a meteorologist.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You don't want her to think that the tri-state area is the entire world here. That's for sure.
No, no, and I also understand that some people unfortunately don't have the resources to get from point A to point B. So growing up, we came from a working class family, so we didn't do a lot of traveling for us was going to New Jersey or driving to Baltimore. So I'd maybe been on a plane the first 15 years of my life, maybe 5 or 6 times, even though I was always fascinated with flying. Now I'm probably on a plane probably once a quarter, if I can, because I love traveling.
Well, I do as well, Jason. And, I've had several other meteorologists on the show here. Lee Goldberg, Al Roker's been on. And, I'm always curious because when it comes to time to plan these events that are coming up, like when it's your daughter's birthday or when you have the baptism or whatever it is, you have some kind of event, everybody's got to look to you to say, hey, what's the weather going to be here? Like, do you have to come up big on those things for your family? Or are they disappointed if you get it wrong? I mean, do they get hard on you with all that stuff?
No, so it's funny that you mentioned that because about 2 months ago, actually, no, I'm sorry, last month, it feels like it was 2 months ago, we did an event with some very close family and friends, and we wanted an opportunity to introduce the baby to our extended family. And so the one question I kept getting was, hey, this is going to be an outside event. What's the weather going to be like? And, I tell everybody this. I love talking about the weather. I really, really want to make sure that the weather is fine for whatever event that you have, especially if it's me. But I'm just the messenger, okay? So, if the good Lord decides that, he wants to do something else, you got to take it up with him. It's not me. But, yeah, there was a little bit of pressure for that party. And, her birthday is going to be, obviously next summer. And I know we're probably going to do something outdoors. So this is going to be an ongoing thing. So I may have to bribe God and say, I don't know, I'll give you the best weather report if you can just help me be a good father and have these parties outside in good weather. I don't know.
I always wonder that just because, like, so many of the ice breaking conversations are usually about the weather, right? Everyone usually those are that's your field of expertise here. So it's
Sure.
always got to be a little tricky when you do that. Now, let me just ask you before I close this out. How are the pipes here, Jace? Are you a lullaby guy at night here with your daughter? Are you singing songs to try to put her to sleep? How's that? Are you reading baby stories? Or are you a storyteller? How does that work so far?
I'm a big fan of storytelling, and sometimes you got to put a little modern spin on it and maybe change some of the names to make it feel a bit more personalized. In terms of singing, the good Lord told me a long time ago, son, that is not your gift. Your gift is speaking and storytelling. Stick with it, and we'll get you to some places that you've never been to. But singing, I will tell you right now, if I hit an A note, you would probably exit this conversation very quickly.
Clear the building. All right. Well, Jason, I love to ask all the new dad. Well, not all the new dads, all the dads that I get on the podcast. You being a new dad, maybe you could use some advice given to you, or you could give your best advice. What I love to ask all the dads that I get on the podcast is, what type of advice do you have for that other new dad that's out there, or for that about to be father who's listening?
I would say be patient with yourself. Everything that you're concerned about, it will eventually work itself out. It always does. And just give yourself grace. Just know that in the end, this is a new thing, both for you, both your spouse, and even for your kid, too. I mean, your kid's trying to figure it out, too. So don't think that you need to fix everything. Don't think that you need to figure everything out. It will naturally come. Just let the process naturally do what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, well said. I love the message. It's been a lot of fun for me. Jason Frazer, you're a first class father all the way. And thank you so much for giving me a few minutes of your time here on First Class Fatherhood.
Great to be a part of this, and thank you so much for the opportunity.